Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Getting Started with Oxbridge webinar. Let me just check what's happening with the chat, whether you can all write to us. So while we are just waiting for everyone to join, there's loads of people joined already, which is really, really good. While we're waiting for everyone to join, if you could quickly let me know in the chat, where are you joining us from today? So tell me where in the country you're joining us from, or indeed which country are you joining us from, and also whether you're joining by yourself as a student or a parent, or whether you're joining with your parent or child. So I want to know, are you joining by yourself or with a parent or child? And that came out really weird, child. And where are you joining us from? Okay, so UK with a parent, UK. Tell me where in the UK, Manchester, London, loads of people. Southampton, from London, joining as a student by themselves. London, Coventry, Hertfordshire, Southeast, UK. London, Spain. Okay, a parent from Spain. Wiltshire, London. Okay, loads of people from London. There are several people here who are joining on their own, and what I would strongly urge you to do is, if even just for half an hour, 40 minutes, is look, if you're a parent, then this application is for your child. They're the ones who are going to be doing the work, and they need to be fully invested in it. So if you could grab them and just say, watch this webinar with me for 30 minutes to an hour, that would be fantastic. And if you're a student, equally, it is a very, very useful thing for your parents to understand what you're going to be going through for the next 12 months, for example. So if they are available and they can join you for about 30 minutes, that'd be fantastic. The webinar will be going on for a bit longer than that, and we're going to have a Q&A at the end as well. But thank you all very much for joining. I do think we are still getting people joining. Okay, so as I said already, this is a webinar for parents and students applying for STEM subjects, economics and medicine. If you're applying for English or history, this webinar may not be as relevant for you. So have a look, have a see, and see if you find something useful from it. I think there will still be lots of useful things at the beginning, but more of what we'll be talking about towards the end will be tailored towards STEM, economics and medicine applicants. All right, so moving on. Okay, so who are we? Well, my name is Carol. I'm the founder here at the Oxbridge Formula. So let me tell you a little bit more about why I began the Oxbridge Formula. So I studied maths at Oxford and graduated one of the top firsts in my year. Graduated in the top 5%, and then I went on to become a teacher. And over my time teaching, I helped lots and lots of students with their Oxbridge applications. And in my last role was a STEM Oxbridge mentor in the school. I was the Oxbridge STEM mentor, I should say. And one of the things that struck me in general, or has struck me, is that often the person who's the Oxbridge coordinator or the head of Oxbridge in the school is a classicist or a historian. And the reason that those people hold that position is they're very good at checking personal statements. They can guide you a lot with your personal statements. They can kind of guide you with extra reading and so on and so forth. However, in a STEM application at Oxford or Cambridge, the personal statement doesn't really play a big part, and we're going to be exploring that later on today. And advice such as, do wider reading, isn't that applicable for a mathematician or an engineer, for example? It's more about their problem solving. And so actually some of that advice can be quite counterproductive in some ways. So I thought we'd create something which was really specific to help students in these subjects get the help they needed for their own applications in their own subjects. And that's how we started the Oxbridge Formula. And Chris was the founding tutor. So Chris, if you'd like to say hi to everyone.
Hi, everybody.
And Chris, you're going to be hearing from a lot today as well. Chris is our founding and lead tutor here at the Oxbridge Formula, and he also has a first-class degree from Oxford University, and has been we've been running the Oxbridge Formula for close to 8 years now. So he is very, very clever for a start, and also very good at simplifying the most complex of concepts, and he has a knack. He has a way of making you understand something which otherwise would have been really difficult. So, if you ever do get taught by him, it's quite a privilege. And we've also got later on joining us, Will, and Daniel, who are an economist and medic from Cambridge, respectively. So we have got the Oxford and the Cambridge side represented, and they'll be joining us towards the end, where we're going to be having a Q&A session, and we'll be able to answer all of your questions. By the way, if I can make this very clear, if you could limit your questions to be in the Q&A box rather than the chat, that would be fantastic, because then we'll gather them all up at the end and we'll answer them for you. So also present today is Becky. She's our head of communications. Becky, if you just want to say a quick hello to everybody, just say hi.
Hello.
We've got Jansu, who is our programs consultant.
Hi, everyone.
And we've got Paul here, who is one of our lead consultants.
Good evening, everybody.
Excellent. All right, good. So let's get started then. What are we going to be covering today? Oh, by the way, these are just some of our students who have worked with us in the past and have been successful at gaining a place at Oxford and Cambridge, so we really do know what we're talking about. Let's have a look at what we're going to be covering. So we've got these 5 key things that we want to cover today. The first one being, what is the Oxbridge Formula, right? There is one Oxbridge Formula. What is that? And then the second thing is, there are 2 extra hurdles that students need to overcome if they are going to be successful at getting this place at Oxbridge. So that's a really important one. What are these 2 extra hurdles that Oxbridge applicants have that other applicants don't have? 3 A and A star grades. We're going to be talking about the grade requirements, both at GCSE and A level and so on, that are a necessary condition, but that are sufficient, but not, they are necessary, but they might not be sufficient for you getting the place. Fourthly, how can we help you increase your success rate? Well, firstly, what is the competition? What is the landscape like nowadays? How competitive are these courses really? And then how can we support you, or what support can you get? And 5th thing that we're going to be looking at is, how much work do we think is actually required? But not only how much work, but what is the right type of work to do? How can you make the most of the work that you do in order to maximize your chances of getting into Oxbridge? Okay, so let's have a quick look. Number 1, the Oxbridge Formula. So you might be thinking to yourself, surely there's not a formula to get into Oxbridge, like surely it's not that easy. And we're not saying it's easy, but these are the components that you need to be able to demonstrate in order to show Oxford and Cambridge that you are a worthy candidate of getting a place there, right? So what do Oxford and Cambridge test for or look for of their applicants? Well, okay, the Oxbridge Formula is that your chances of Oxbridge success are equal to the ability that you demonstrate, the passion you demonstrate for your subject, and the potential that you demonstrate for your subject. So let's talk about these 3. What have you got next, Chris? We'll talk quickly about why these 3 are the key components. Chris, if you want to start going through this, and I'll add some things in.
Okay, so yeah, I think for context discussing those 2 components, we need to talk about what Oxbridge is like in particular academically, because that informs what they're looking for. So one of the key things about Oxbridge is a significant part of the teaching is done in small groups, 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, so maybe a couple of students with 1 tutor. So is it called tutorials or supervisions, depending on if you're at Oxford or Cambridge. And so in between those, you have to do a lot of independent work. So you'll maybe get a problem sheet, you've got to work on that for, I don't know, 5 hours, doing all this independent work, and then you go to a tutorial to discuss it. So you need to be able to work independently. And that includes that while there will be lectures, you have to figure out how to apply that to the problems you're working on independently. Or in the case of, say, a humanities lecture, apply it in writing an essay.
So very quickly, like you may only have like 10 hours of lectures, and you might have 25 hours of problem sheets to do. So that's the amount of independent study that's going to be required of you.
So as it says here, the academic standard is also very high. Everyone there is very academically accomplished and they expect a lot of you. The terms are very short, but that doesn't mean you have to do less work. It just means they're very intense.
So essentially, so something that you might fit into 10 weeks at another university, you might even be doing more than that, but now within 8-week terms. So yeah, it's very intense. And also when we talk about vacations, the reason it's called a vacation, not a holiday, is that you're actually vacating Oxford and Cambridge in order to kind of carry on with your studies and consolidate what you've done over those very intense terms. So yeah, then studying during vacations, and classification comes mostly from exams. Chris, talk about that.
Well, I mean, first, as you say, because there's so much work to do in short terms, you might have to continue studying in the vacation. And then when you come back, and when it comes to the end of term, you're mostly not doing coursework. At least it's rarely a large component of the degree. You're being examined in exams, which means firstly you have to be that bit more prepared. You're not going to be able to refer to your notes in the exam, and then it means it's that bit sort of more high pressured as well.
Okay, fantastic. So let's quickly then talk about what these three components of the Oxbridge Formula are. So firstly, we have passion. So when we say passion, what do we mean? It's a love of your subject as it will be studied at university, right? Now, why do we emphasize the as it will be studied at university part? Well, the way you study your subject at school isn't going to necessarily be the same as how you're going to study at university. Now, I'll give you an example of, for example, maths. Maths at school is you learn a topic and you do lots of exercises on it, you get good at a skill. At university, it's not just about answering questions or doing calculations. There's a lot of proof involved, there's a lot of rigor. And that isn't something that you actually spend much time doing at school. So if you just love doing lots of calculations, then actually maths as it's studied at university might not be for you. So you've got to love the parts of maths that you're going to be covering at university. And here we're talking more about proofs and rigor, and it is the same in other subjects. Understand it as it will be taught at university. And why is it so important to have passion? Well, we just saw it's very intense, it's highly academic. And actually, you know what, an Oxbridge degree is really tough. There are going to be times when you find it really difficult, and you need something to keep you motivated. And what's going to keep you motivated is your love for the subject, the passion that you have for your subject. The second thing in the Oxbridge Formula is ability, right? So how much knowledge and skills do you currently have? How well are you doing at school? You know, are you one of the best A-level or IB candidates in your school? Are you doing really well compared to your peers? Do you easily understand things that are going on at school? Because this is going to be a step up. So having that ability with your A-level subjects is definitely a prerequisite to being a good Oxbridge applicant. But what's even more important is the potential, right? So Oxbridge aren't teaching what you know now. They're not saying who has the most knowledge, who's done the most work and done the most reading, and that's it. They want to know how teachable you are, right? They want to know where they can take you. They want to know how much potential you have. And when we say teachable in an Oxbridge context, remember Chris just mentioned that at Oxford and Cambridge, you have small group tutorials. So that's like one tutor and a couple of students. And you know, there's a couple of you with a world-class professor. So when you're in that situation, right, if they give you some hints, can you move forward? Can you actually take those on board and improve your own performance? They want to see how teachable you are. And because they want to see how teachable you are, they don't want to test you on things that you already know. They want to know how can you apply and extend what you do know to something which is really unfamiliar, to an unfamiliar problem, for example, right? How intellectually curious are you? How much do you enjoy finding out about things that you don't already know? And do you have a growth mindset? Do you have the skills to be able to learn and grow beyond your comfort zone? These are the types of things that Oxford and Cambridge are looking for. And you'll see when we look at the 2 extra hurdles that these skills are very much tested as part of those extra hurdles. So what other reasons are there to apply for Oxbridge? So we already said if you're somebody who really thrives in an academic environment, then it's absolutely a place for you. But why else might we want to be there? Chris, tell us about some of the unique combinations of courses that they offer.
Okay, so first of all, at Cambridge, you have natural sciences. So that is a subject you get at some other unis, but it is rare. And that means that you're basically studying sciences together. So when you apply, you don't apply for, say, chemistry or biology or physics. You apply for natural sciences, probably with, maybe you have one of those as your favorite, but when you get to uni, you're going to have to study multiple of those together until maybe later in your degree you specialize. PPE is not quite unique, but to Oxford, but it's
Renowned.
Yeah, it's something Oxford's famous for, and it's not too common elsewhere. This combination of 3 subjects. Also at Oxford, you get various combinations of STEM subjects with philosophy, so maths and philosophy, physics and philosophy, computer science and philosophy. Some more unique ones are land economy at Cambridge, which is pretty much unique to Cambridge, and materials science at Oxford. You maybe get it as a component of a degree somewhere else, but you just study it by itself in Oxford. And some things are sort of taught differently at Oxbridge to elsewhere. So lots of universities have engineering degrees, but both Oxford and Cambridge, you don't apply for, say, aeronautical engineering or electrical engineering or mechanical engineering. You just apply for engineering, and your first couple of years are just general engineering. You have to be a generalist, and then you can specialize later. And because that's quite different to most other unis, you need to be aware of that when you're applying. Medicine is also a little bit different at Oxford and Cambridge to other unis. It's taught in a traditional style. And in fact, the first 3 or so years of the degree are basically a science degree. And then only then you start the clinical stuff to any significant degree, which is kind of different from how it's taught at most other places.
Okay, fantastic. So college system, right? That might be another reason why you might want to go there. The college system is quite unique to Oxford and Cambridge. I think maybe Durham also offers something similar, but what is the college system? So the universities of Oxford and Cambridge are basically split up into these smaller communities within the university. I think there are around 25 to 30 colleges, undergraduate colleges at both Oxford and Cambridge. And all of the colleges, have a looking at these pictures, you can see that they all have a different varied size and feel. And it's the college that takes care of your accommodation, your food, your welfare, and also your tutorials or supervisions, those small group teaching sessions, they take place in college as well. Whereas a lot of the other teaching, for example, lecture-based teaching or lab-based teaching is done altogether as university. So different students from different colleges will come together for their subject teaching in lectures. And then in your colleges, there'll be different people from all different subjects that you're living with, and that can be quite nice. Why Oxbridge? What other reasons are there? Well, look, job prospects and salaries are another big thing. So just having a look here, we've done a little comparison, and the reason we've chosen Anglia Ruskin is because it's also in Cambridge, and similarly Oxford Brookes is in Oxford. So we were trying to kind of get rid of that geographical bias. But looking at students' median or graduates' median salaries after 5 years, you can see that between Cambridge and Anglia Ruskin, the salary almost doubles by having a degree from Cambridge, and it's significantly higher at Oxford compared to Oxford Brookes. And if we even compare the Oxford and Cambridge salaries with just another Russell Group university, we can see that there is quite a big jump as well. So not to say that the salary is the only reason, but it definitely does increase your job prospects by having a degree from Oxbridge. And I should also mention these are median salaries, right? So if you're applying for a STEM subject, typically your salaries after a few years could be even higher than this, depending on what field you decide to go into. So what is it actually like living at Oxford or Cambridge? Well, ultimately, the atmosphere isn't that different. It's another university, and the atmosphere does actually vary between colleges. So when you go and visit them on an open day, you'll get a different scent, you'll get a different feel. Sometimes you just get a gut feeling about which college is right for you. There are some traditions at Oxford and Cambridge. So one picture I wanted to draw your attention to is that picture there of those boys. Now, based on what they're wearing, I can tell quite a lot about them. So they are all going to an exam because they're wearing this outfit called subfus. Now, you wear this outfit at kind of matriculation or graduation, but how do I know they're going to an exam? Well, they've all got this flower on them, and that flower is a carnation. And it's just a small tradition that takes place at Oxford, but on the first day of your exams, you wear a white carnation. And then on the days when you have all your middle exams, you wear a pink carnation. On the last day of your exams, you have a red carnation. So they're just like these little traditions that Oxford and Cambridge have. I should just emphasize that you don't dress like that every day. So if you look in the bottom picture, that's how you normally dress, just normally. But during exams, unfortunately at Oxford, you do have to wear this kind of uniform. And yeah, look, overall it is an academic vibe, but I'm guessing you wouldn't be on this webinar about Oxbridge applications if you didn't enjoy academic work. And you know, one of the nice things about going to Oxford and Cambridge is everyone there enjoys their subject and they love doing what they do. So if that's you, then you'd fit right in. In terms of cost, tell us a bit more, Chris.
Well, so firstly, the fees are just the same as most other Russell Group unis. It's not any more expensive. There are subsidies and bursaries available, in fact, probably more so than most universities. So that's something you might want to research if you think that might be applicable to you. One useful fact about Oxbridge terms being shorter is that you pay less for accommodation because you move out at the end of term, so you're only paying for the time you're there. At least if you're getting your accommodation from your college. One downside is that because the terms are so intense, it is difficult to find paid work, and in fact that's discouraged. So there's kind of a trade-off there.
Yeah, I think you're not really allowed like a job with many hours at either university. Yeah. Okay, now let's go on to what those extra hurdles are. What are the two extra hurdles? Well, they are admissions tests and interviews. Okay. So let's look at the application timeline. All right, let's work back. Okay, so in October the 15th, in fact, that is the deadline for your UCAS application if you're an Oxford or Cambridge applicant. And before that, you'll be spending some time writing your personal statement. And then you'll have an admissions test. Now, most subjects, for the subjects that we're talking about here, have a pre-interview admissions test, which takes place either straight after your UCAS form is given in. In fact, I think this year some of the tests were like 3 days after the UCAS form is due. But the majority of them take place at the beginning of November. So you're going to have your admissions test there, and based on how well you do in that test, you're going to be called to interview. If you do well, you'll be called to interview, and the interviews take place pretty much, you know, at the second week of December, first or second week of December. Okay, so then you're going to do your interviews then, and you'll find out in January whether or not you're offered a place. Now, with the admissions test, there is one exception to the rule, which is if you're applying for Cambridge Maths or Imperial Computer Science, they require you to sit another test, which is called the STEP. Now, that stands for the 6th term examination paper. It's a very, very tough maths test. And the reason it's got the word 6th term on it is because it takes place in the 6th term of your 6th form. In other words, it takes place in the last term of your A-levels of year 13, at the same time that you're doing your A-levels. So that test actually takes place after you've received your offers. Okay, so right, your test is at the beginning of November, end of October, but when do we recommend doing your admissions test preparation? Chris, if we could just point to that. We'll be starting our preparation, or we'd recommend starting it pretty much now, right? There is no better time to start than now. These tests are tough, and they're definitely not tests that you cram for, right? And as I said earlier, they are designed to test not your knowledge. So it's not like, let me learn these few things. Great, tick, I can do the admissions test really well. They're designed to test your ability to apply what you do know to very unfamiliar and very different looking problems. And that problem solving skill is something that takes time to develop. It's not something that you get overnight. So we recommend starting to develop those problem solving skills from now. Okay. And it's something that as we get closer and closer and closer to the exam, we will be spending we will be applying those skills to harder and harder problems so that you're ready for anything that the test throws at you. And similarly for interviews. Now, a lot of people think an interview is going to be like a job interview, but it's not. They're going to ask you very academic questions, which are potentially harder than what they ask you in the test. So again, maybe your core interview preparation and mock interviews and things like that would take place closer to the time. But the skills that you need to develop for interviews are things that you can be developing from now, and that's something that we strongly recommend. And then all throughout this time, of course, you're still going to be carrying on with your A-level preparation. And if you're doing STEP next year as well, then your STEP preparation as well. Interspersed amongst that, there'll be various open days, typically around May, July and September. And I would strongly encourage you to go to those open days to find out more about the subjects as they're taught at university and about the colleges that you'll be applying to. So let's quickly look at admissions tests then. Why do Oxford and Cambridge ask students to do an extra admissions test? Well, firstly, GCSEs and A-levels really aren't enough of a differentiator, okay? Like the number of people getting A's and A stars is a lot, right? But the proportion of that cohort who will actually get into Oxford or Cambridge is far, far smaller, as we're going to see later on in the presentation. And as I've said, I'm going to sound like a broken record, they aren't just testing your knowledge, they're testing your problem-solving skills, and they're testing your ability to think under pressure. So the admissions tests are testing your problem-solving skills and testing how well you do in extremely time-pressured conditions, okay? And again, they're testing your ability and potential. In other words, how can you apply your knowledge to unfamiliar problems? They're used as a funnel, right? They can't invite everyone to interview, unfortunately. I think, you know, in an ideal world, they would, but there's only so much resource, there's only so much time they have, and they can't interview everyone. And the number of applicants is increasing. So they need a way to funnel the very best applicants to get interviewed and then to select from there. And lastly, or sorry, second to last, they have designed these tests to have a correlation with degree success. So over the years, they've been developing these tests, and they've adjusted and amended the tests so that somebody's performance in these admissions tests correlates to how well they do at the end of their degree, their third year of their degree or the final year of their degree. And so now these tests, these admissions test scores become quite a good predictor of how well that person is going to thrive, or how much that person is going to thrive in that degree course. And I should emphasize, this is a webinar about STEM applications. Admissions tests are significantly more important for STEM than they are for humanities subjects for a couple of reasons. Firstly, that the courses are that much more competitive. And secondly, that the personal statement is less important for STEM subjects, as we will see later on in the presentation. So let's have a look what we've got next. Chris, talk us through the STEM admissions test that we have for Oxford first.
Okay, so first of all, if you're applying for maths or computer science or a joint degree with either of those, you take the maths admissions test, the MAT. It's got sort of two parts. There's a multiple choice first part, and then there's a part with sort of longer multiple part questions where you have to write more. And it's obviously a maths test. For physics, engineering, and material science and joint courses, you're doing the physics admissions test. So that's also got a sort of multiple choice first part and then a long answer second part. And it's basically a 50-50 mix of maths and physics. Then there's a whole lot of courses, lots of things involving economics, psychology, and social sciences, and specifically PPE and economics and management. For which you need the thinking skills assessment, the TSA. That's an entirely, so that's got a first paper, which is entirely multiple choice. And then there is an essay paper that's only required for some subjects, though. The multiple choice first half is, well, it's a thinking skills test, and that can basically be broken down into two types of questions. There's problem solving questions, which tend to be sort of quantitative, so basic maths, logic, spatial reasoning, things like that. And then there's the critical thinking part, which is a more text-based. So you have to read a passage, and then you've got to identify the conclusion, identify any flaws in the argument, and so on. And then if you're applying for medicine or biomedical sciences, there's the biomedical admissions test, which has basically everything in it. So there's a first paper, which is a lot like the TSA. It's multiple choice, problem solving, and critical thinking. And then there's a second one, which is multiple choice, maths, physics, biology, and chemistry. You have to do all 4 subjects. And then there's a third paper, which is an essay. If we look at Cambridge, as Parul discussed, for maths at Cambridge, you do the STEP. So those are papers with quite long questions. You might spend half an hour, 40 minutes per question, and the whole hour is the whole exam is 3 hours. You have to do 2 of them, and obviously those are maths questions. If you're applying for computer science or economics, the test is the TMUA, so the test of mathematics university admission, I think that is, and that's a multiple choice test. There's 2 papers. It's entirely maths. The one unique thing about it is the second paper has a bit of a focus on sort of logic and proof, that side of maths. For engineering, you're taking the engineering admissions assessment, so the ENGA, that's multiple choice maths and physics. For natural sciences, you're doing the natural sciences admissions assessment, and that's also used for chemical engineering and veterinary medicine. It's multiple choice, and it's very similar to the ENGA. It's just that now you have to do maths, but you can pick one of the three sciences to do alongside that. And then finally, for medicine, there's the BMAT, which is the same as it was for Oxford. I think we should say here that some of these tests are likely to change in a couple of years. So if you're not going to be applying next year, then some of this information might be different. If you're applying next year, they could change some of it a little bit, but it's not expected to change a lot.
Yeah, I would say these are the tests that you would need if you're a 2024 entry student. In other words, if you'll be entering uni in 2024.
Okay, so just want to kind of illustrate how admissions tests are harder than A-level. So I apologize for using a maths example. If you're a parent and you haven't looked at A-levels for a while, then don't worry, I'm just going to talk about kind of the format of the question. I'm not going to do any maths. So an A-level question, here's one from a maths paper. Let's see, we're given an equation at the start. We're asked to do some quite specific tasks. We're asked to express it in a certain form. Then we're asked to sketch the graph and find some coordinates. And we're asked to find a distance. And these are all quite concrete tasks. They're quite numerical, like we're just given specific numbers in the original function, and then we're asked to find numerical results, and we're told how many marks each part is worth. So now, if we compare that to a long question from an admissions test, this is from the maths admissions test for Oxford. This is actually on a similar topic. So we're still given a function at the start, but now it's harder, it's more difficult. So we can see that there's not just numbers in there, there's a letter. And in fact, you have to think about how this function changes as the value of this variable k changes. And if we look at the task you're asked to do, they're not as simple as calculate this or write it in this form. So firstly, part one says without evaluating, so without doing a calculation, write down an expression for something. So this is sort of testing your ability to understand what's going on without calculating. And you also see something like that later. It asks you not to calculate certain things explicitly, as you're meant to sort of show your understanding without doing that. So it's like a deeper understanding you're showing. And it also comes out in some of the other sort of instruction words we have. So this is an explain question. This one is asking you to explain how can something happen. And question 5 is also an explain question. So there's a lot more explaining to do. You might be writing more words than numbers. And you've got to show deeper understanding again in that respect. If we look at some multiple choice questions from various tests, just to show you what they kind of look like. So this is the sort of thing you might see in the TSA or the BMAT. It's a critical thinking question. So you've got a passage to read, quite a long passage, because you have less than 2 minutes to do each of these questions. You've got to read this, you've got to understand what the argument is, and then the question is, which of these 5 options, if true, would most weaken the argument? So, and you've got to analyze it in that way. This is sort of the other side of the TSA and BMAT thinking skills questions. This is a problem-solving question. So this is about folding shapes. And again, you have less than 2 minutes to do this sort of exercise. And then this is an example scientific question. You might see this in the ENSA for natural sciences, or again, the BMAT, the second paper of the BMAT. It's a chemistry question. The thing I'll note about this is, well, a couple of things. So firstly, again, it's not, it may be in the A-level you'd be asked about the reactivity of specific elements. This is telling you, I've got 4 elements, J, M, Q, and T. You're not going to find those in the periodic table. They're just, you're not meant to know about specific elements here. You're meant to use sort of your deeper understanding of reactivity to answer this, not knowing what they are. And the second thing I note about this is, although it's multiple choice, you're given 6 reactions and you're asked which 3 could take place. So you basically have to think about all of them. So there's a lot more work to do than just like a single exercise. So just because it's multiple choice doesn't mean it's short. And again, you wouldn't have that much time for this, maybe a couple of minutes.
Interviews, right? So important to realize that an Oxbridge interview is not a job interview. Okay, what you're going to be doing at Oxford or Cambridge is nothing like a job interview. They're not going to ask you to explain your competencies or your skills or why you might be a good fit for this the course. They're going to be wanting again to demonstrate, well, they're going to want you to demonstrate those passion, ability, and potential skills. So the whole thing is going to feel like a sample tutorial or supervision. In other words, the interview emulates the way that you're going to be taught at university if you did get into Oxford or Cambridge. So the question to you, Chris, is what might an interview question look like in all of the different subjects?
Okay, so these are just very brief sort of impressions. It definitely isn't exhaustive. Just some examples. So for maths, a very common task is to sketch the graph of a function you're given, possibly quite a weird function you won't have seen at school before, or maybe to prove a theorem that's stated for you. For physics or engineering, you typically have to sort of analyze some kind of physical system or scenario. So it might be a circuit or a collision or projectile motion or something else. In chemistry, so maybe you have to explain how to make or detect a chemical or how some kind of reaction happens. Biology and medicine, and something to note here is that a significant part of a medicine interview is going to be basically the same like a science interview, so biology and chemistry and maybe some other stuff. So some examples might be analyzing causes and effects of a change in the body, like what happens and what causes it. For economics, maybe you have to analyze the effects of some change again. So they say, okay, this happens, what will the effect be? Maybe you're given a graph or some data and you've got to interpret it. And then say you're doing PPE, the sort of less STEM side of the subject, what would that be like? Typically there you're maybe critiquing arguments, so you're given an argument, you're presented with something, you have to critique it. You're asked an open-ended question, you've got to give your own argument, or maybe you're asked to define something or criticize a proposed definition. If I move on to the next one. Just to go into a bit more detail.
So yes, again, so just to emphasize, ability and potential are the things that are going to be tested of you in an admissions test, or just as in an admissions test in an interview, and your passion as well, because you can really demonstrate your passion when you're talking in an interview, right? So as we said already, in an interview, they're looking for your teachability. How well do you respond to criticism and guidance? Also your intuition and understanding. How well are you able to kind of understand what they're saying and give the appropriate answer? So what are attributes of somebody who does really well in an interview? Well, firstly, in a STEM interview, you mostly do want to eventually reach the right answer or conclusion. But what I must emphasize is that reaching the right answer is not the be all and end all. It's about how you get there. It's about the journey. It's about your thought processes in getting to the answer. So for example, in my interview, I was actually asked a maths question. I was like, I already know the answer, but you want me to prove it, don't you? And they were like, yes. So it wasn't about knowing what the answer was. It was just, how did I get to that answer? How did I justify it? How did I prove it? And look, they are going to be asking you questions outside of your comfort zone. They're not expecting you to know the answer. In fact, if you already know the answer, then they're going to give you harder and harder and harder questions until you don't know immediately how to do it. And you really have to think. So given that they're going to be giving you questions that you don't immediately know how to answer, do you know how to ask the right questions? Do you know, like, for example, if they give you a maths question, you might say something like, would it be a good idea for me to differentiate this? You know, and asking that kind of question shows the interviewer that you're along the right lines, and then they can guide you and help you further. Can you suggest good starting points for the question? And importantly, can you express, i.e. articulate and apply technical concepts? So how well do you explain and apply these concepts that you do know? Can you give full and precise explanations? That's so important. You don't just want to be sitting there in silence. How can they know what you're thinking if you just sit there in silence? The idea behind an interview is for that interviewer to get kind of understand the workings of your mind. So you very much have to speak your thought processes out loud while you're doing these problems and be able to give full and precise explanations. Can you correct your own thinking? So imagine you go down one route and then the examiner says, well, the interviewer says, well, what about this? Have you considered this? And if you're like just going down your path and you're not taking on the advice that they've given you, then you're not going to do well in the interview. So can you correct your own thinking? Can you take on board the hints that the interviewer is giving you? How teachable are you really? So I think this next point there emphasizes that. Can you use the interviewer's comments to move on and to move forward with the question? As Chris said, a medicine interview is a lot like a natural sciences interview, unlike interviews at other universities, which could be more competency-based, which could be more about medical ethics or communication skills. A medicine interview at Oxford or Cambridge is actually going to cover a lot of science, maths, and generally your problem-solving skills as well. Chris, talk to us about economics interviews.
Okay, so a lot of things still apply. You've got to express your ideas clearly. You've got to be able to sort of take on hints, correct your own thinking, be teachable, just as before. Some things that are slightly different in economics and social sciences compared to STEM subjects we were looking at before. It's worth just saying at this point, especially at Cambridge, a significant part of an economics interview might be maths, in which case exactly what we were discussing on the previous slide applies. But suppose you're asked a more sort of the economics question, sort of a discussion question. Some other things you've got to show are your ability to understand and respond to new ideas, sort of in an argument form. So sort of qualitative ideas. You might have to use a source and like analyze data. And you're being tested on your ability to basically argue and criticize arguments, like evaluate claims and arguments and criticize them. And one thing that is slightly different is that in a STEM interview, they might ask you one question about something you said in your personal statement, typically more as a warm-up. In an economics interview, you might be quizzed on a bit more, like maybe you've done some reading and they want to know exactly what you thought about it, and they'll sort of test you on your ability to argue based on that.
Hey, great. So 4 key parts of interview preparation. As I said already, do lots and lots of tough problems, but also get mocks, right? You want to be practicing. It's not just enough to do tough questions. That's really good. It develops your thinking process. But doing mocks where you're having a conversation with somebody is really important. It gets you in the zone for what you're going to have, what you're going to be facing in the interview. And importantly, the person that you're talking to about these questions, the person you're doing the mock with, has to be someone who can stretch you in that subject. So look, it's still useful doing, I don't know, a conversation with a parent, and the parent asks a question, you answer it. But that isn't how an interview at Oxford or Cambridge really goes. They're going to ask you a question, you're going to answer it, and then they're going to say, okay, but have you thought about this? Or why don't you think about this? Or here's another question. Or how would you extend this? Or they'll give you a prompt and then you've got to keep going, or you're stuck and then they give you a hint. So they have to be super subject specialists and really good at their subject in order to be able to give you an accurate experience of what it's like going to be in that interview. And I think that's question number 3 is, are the questions representative? It's very rarely that they ask you one question, then you just speak a load of prose for, the next 10 minutes. It's very much discussion. And the hints and the questions and the back and forth that you're going to have with the tutor, that needs to be representative of what's really going to happen in the interview. So that's very important. But one thing you can do in your own time is just practice explaining your subject in words. Like when you're doing your A-level work, as you're doing some exercises, for example, just speak your thought processes out loud so you get used to justifying why you're doing what you're doing, or explaining what you're doing if it's more of a discursive topic. So those are my 4 key tips for interview preparation. Okay, great. So in the chat to me then, what is the most insightful or interesting thing that you have learned so far from today's presentation, would you say? Can you all write in the chat? Can you? Yeah, you can, I think. Okay, somebody says they need to start as early as possible. The interview part's been really interesting. The information on admissions tests, the layout of the interviews, the fact that there is support that is given. Yes, fantastic. Information about admissions tests. Start now. Yes, okay, if that's one thing you've taken away, I'm really happy. That's brilliant. The interview style, information on admissions tests. The personal statement isn't that important. Yeah, we'll go into that in just a second. The difference in interview methods, the specific assessments required for different courses, the whole interview process, tests and applications, planning for interviews. Fantastic. The fact that interviews are questions and how much work has to be put into applying. The overall process of enrolling was very useful. The difference between A-levels and admissions tests. We didn't know how important the admissions test was. We believed it was mostly A-levels and reference. Yeah, I'm so glad you've taken away that other things are really important as well. Okay, great, fantastic. So if we go into the next bit, so A and A star grades, typical A and A star grades. Chris, if you talk about this, please.
Okay, so if we start with Oxford, very quickly, engineering and chemistry, the grade requirements are highest 2 A stars and an A, and for IB, you basically need a 40 overall. Maths is also 2 A stars and an A, but the IB grade is slightly lower. Medicine is 1 A star and 2 A's, and most STEM degrees are like that, 1 A star and 2 A's, and then most humanities are just 3 A's. You can see the IB grades go similarly, so 39 for most STEM and 38, so 1 lower for most humanities. And I'm including sort of economics, geography, social sciences with STEM in there. And for Scottish Highs, you can see it also kind of goes, well, it's pretty much the same for all of them, like two A's at high level. The main thing to note about Cambridge is that it's typically like 1 step up from Oxford. So, okay, maths is still 2 A stars and an A, but you also need STEP. And now most STEM subjects are 2 A stars and an A rather than 1 A star and 2 A's. And social sciences and humanities tend to be 1 A star and 2 A's. Another thing is that the IB grade requirements are notoriously high at Cambridge, up to 42. It depends on the college. And for Scottish Highers, they care about the difference between a high A and a low A, so an A1 and a high A. And just to clarify, these are basically the standard offer. So firstly, they'd be looking for you to have these as your predicted grades, but also this is what you'd have to achieve your offer.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize here, right? Like, we are talking about A-level grades. These are the bare minimum requirements, right? Because as we said, pretty much everyone applying to your course is going to have these grades. They're just like they're kind of like the tick box. It's the admissions test and interview that are really the core like assessments that are going to be responsible for getting you into Oxbridge. So I just want to make that very clear. This is again a necessary requirement to get these A and A star grades, but just not sufficient at all. And pretty much everyone applying will get them. And we're going to see later on how competitive the courses are. So yeah, carry on, Chris, sorry.
Well, if we go to the next slide. About GCSEs, obviously they'll typically see your GCSE grades when you apply. It's not part of your offer. These are not requirements, these are average GCSE grades for people who did receive offers from Cambridge. So if we look at this, the average number of what would have been a grade A in the old system and that Cambridge still thinks of as a grade A, which is basically grades of 7, 8, or 9. Those is typically 9 or 10 for most STEM and social science subjects. And then the number of A stars, which is what they call 8 or 9 grades, is almost as high, like one step down, like 7s, 8s, and 9s. So the average offer holder does have a lot of very good GCSEs. That doesn't mean it's impossible to apply without that, but well, if we look at this quote from Oxford, it kind of gives a bit of context. It says, for UK students applying for an undergraduate course, they look at information about your school and your neighbourhood and your experience in the care system, if any, when they're analysing your GCSE grades. So they're basically comparing you to what they'd expect you to get based on where you're from and what school you went to. It says applicants from the most disadvantaged backgrounds will be strongly recommended to be shortlisted for interview, provided they're predicted to achieve the standard conditional offer for the course. So you do have to get the right predicted A-level grades. It also says, and that you perform to an appropriate standard any required pre-interview admissions tests. You still have to, that's kind of the purpose of the admissions test, is to tell students apart, and you still have to reach the required standard in that.
I think, yeah, this is emphasizing the same thing. So like, you do need the right grades, but what they're saying is that beyond that, you then need to do really well in the admissions test as well. So if your GCSE grades weren't as good, but you do really well in your A-levels and admissions tests, then it's good, it's okay.
Oh, Pavel, I think you had something to say about this.
Okay, yeah. So some people think to themselves, right? is preparing for Oxbridge going to take me away from my A-level preparation? Okay, this is a genuine fear. People are like, I'm focusing on my A-levels right now. Do I need to prepare for Oxbridge, etc., etc., etc.? Now, we've already said the time to start preparing is now. But why do people have this worry? Well, they worry that, okay, I'm going to be doing this extra stuff and it's going to take me away from what I'm doing at school. But what I want you to remember is, what did we say Oxbridge preparation was? It was taking the knowledge you already have from A-level and then applying it to much more difficult things, much more unfamiliar problems, but you really have to think about what you've learned. It's not just a case of like let me just apply it. It's like, I really have to think about it, understand it very deeply in order to be able to apply it. So actually, if you prepare for an Oxbridge type question, it just makes you better at your A-levels. So admission statistics. For comparison, right, let's just have a look. I want to remember this webinar is about STEM subjects, right? So let's just, for comparison, look at some non-STEM subjects. In general, for example, overall, English stats, Oxford is about 24% of people who apply get in. It's about a quarter. Cambridge is 25%, about a quarter. History, we're looking at Oxford 23% and Cambridge 31%. So look, still not by no means a given if you apply to these subjects that you're going to get in. Biology, biological natural sciences is around 17 or 22%. Overall, the chances of getting into Oxford or Cambridge are about 19-20%, so 1 in 5. And for international students or international applicants, there's actually much higher. We're looking at around 6 or 10%. Much lower chances or much higher competition of around 6 or 10% at Oxford and Cambridge, respectively. Okay. But now let's look at the stats specifically for each of these subjects. So something like physical natural sciences is around 18%, but it's still very competitive. Engineering goes down to 16 or 14%, physics 13%. Medicine at Oxford or Cambridge respectively is 9 and 14%. And then if we go down to the economics or social science subjects, we just point to those. We've got economics being around 11%, PPE 11%, and E&M, economics and management at Oxford, that is just 6%. It's the most competitive course at Oxford and Cambridge, right? Very, very competitive. Maths is 11 or 15% at Oxford or Cambridge, and I wouldn't look at the 15% and think to yourself, oh, it's so much easier to get into Cambridge Maths than it is Oxford. The Cambridge Maths requirements are really hard with the STEP exam, and so a lot of people self-select. So you have Cambridge is known as the best uni in the world for maths. A lot of really good applicants apply there. So those are both very competitive, and computer science is at a very low 6 or 8% at Oxford or Cambridge respectively. And these stats are changing and getting more and more and more competitive all the time. So let's just put this into perspective, right? Say you're applying for something like, what do we say, medicine at Oxford. There is a 91% chance that you might not make it in, right? A 91% chance that you won't get in. Computer science, we're looking at a 94% chance or 92 or 94% chance. So I'm not trying to say this to kind of scare you, but you do need to show yourself to be outstanding, okay? And a lot of you, when you were writing about stuff in the chat, thought, okay, to stand out, I need to show my personality, I need to show my passion, I need to do loads of extracurriculars. But let's remember what Oxford and Cambridge were actually looking for, right? They were looking for ability, passion, and potential. And how do they test those? They test those through the admissions test. So imagine if 80+% of people aren't getting in, they need a discrete way to check who are the people that we are letting in. And the admissions test score, getting the highest one you possibly can, and the interview score, getting the highest you possibly can, are the very, very, very best ways to stand out. And I'll explain, I want to tell you a story, right? When I was at my leaving dinner at university, I did maths at Oxford. On our last dinner, our tutor thought it would be hilarious to get all our personal statements and read them out, and we had to guess whose was whose. And genuinely, they all sounded so similar that there was no way you could differentiate one person from the other based on their personal statement. Like, everyone was guessing all over the place, and most of the people thought it was me because I was a big geek at university. It really wasn't possible to differentiate people based on their personal statement, based on their extracurriculars or anything like that. Simply, the thing that would have differentiated each of us was how well we did in the quantitative part of the application process, in other words, the admissions tests and interviews, right? I really want to drill home on that. And we're going to be looking at, look, not to say that super quickly aren't important. You need a good personal statement for your other universities, but we'll talk about that in just a second, right? So let's move on, let's keep going. Increasing applications. So we are saying that these are competitive tests. Now let's just look at the trends, right? Look at computer science. 5 years ago, around 750, 800, 900 people applied. Now it's more like close to like 1,700 people applying. The numbers have doubled, okay? And in medicine, the number of applicants at Cambridge has increased by at least 50%. So this is why the courses are getting more and more competitive every year. So if we move on. So should you bother applying? I can imagine after all this, you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, it's so competitive. Is there any point in me applying? And I want to say to you, yes. If you're here, if you bothered to sit through all of this webinar so far, you clearly actually think that there's a point in applying to Oxbridge and you want to do it. You want to challenge yourself. And it's one of 5 choices, which means that you can apply to 4 other universities. But if you want to apply for Oxbridge, why not? It's one of 5 universities. And I say, give it your 100%. Give it everything you've got. The benefits of the application process are as much as, well, are very high, as are the benefits of getting in. But the benefits of applying in itself shows a lot of benefits, or provides a lot of benefits. So some of which are, as I said already, preparing you for Oxbridge will 100% make you better at your A-levels. Like I can guarantee you that. You will become a better student, become a better A-level student. But it also means, say you're prepared for Oxbridge, and yes, look, the chances are not high, right? I mean, we can help make them higher, but they are relatively low chances of getting in. So if you didn't get in, and okay, imagine you were wanting to apply to Cambridge and you got into Imperial instead. And then when you start at Imperial, you're going to be one of the best students. You're going to hit the ground running because you've done all this work in this year to help you get in, okay? And lastly, you won't have the regret of not having tried, right? Like so many people are like, oh, I wish I'd applied to Oxford or Cambridge. Like when I was younger, I wish I'd done it. I wish I'd had the confidence, or I wish I had the support, or I wish someone had said to me why it was so good to apply. So by applying, you will not have the regret of not having tried, and tried your absolute best and improved yourself so much in the process. So yes, I absolutely think it's worth applying to Oxford or Cambridge. And so let's now look at what work is actually required for Oxbridge, right? What work is required to get you in. So quickly, we'll do that, and then we're going to move on to the Q&A, and we've got Will and Daniel joining us now. So somebody has said in the chat, thank you so much for such a great and helpful session. We're not finished yet. We are absolutely not finished. Don't go anywhere. We have got a lot more coming up, but we're just struggling a little bit with technology. There you go. Okay, so 5 hours a week. So is the amount of work that we are expecting from you. So let's move on to the next slide. Chris, if you could just keep the next slide kind of ready at any point. If you just go back to the previous one. Sorry, I think we're having a few tech issues, so apologies for that. Right, so how much work is required, right? If you join our program, we ask our students to put in about 5 or 6 hours of work per week during term time, following a structured study program, following a structured study plan. We give them the work to do, then that's the amount that we're expecting. And I think regardless of whether or not you do just decide to join our program, that's the kind of level of work, after school work, after homework, that we would kind of recommend that you do in order to get yourself kind of to the level, polished to the level that would be required to make you a competitive applicant, given how competitive things are, as we've seen, right? So if we move on. And this is what we sent you, right? Do you recall something like this? We sent a handout like this out to you. Give me a yes or no in the chat. Have you seen something like this before? We sent this to you in an exercise. Okay, everyone is saying mostly yes. Some people are saying no, question mark. The exercise was as follows, right? You had to rank the following activities in order of importance, from least important to most important, depending on subjects. And 3 subject groups were like STEM, so like math, physics, engineering, computer science. Then it was kind of the economics-y type social science subjects like econ, PPE, E&M, which is economics and management. And then lastly, like the medicine type subjects. So let's look, what's the first slide that we have, Chris? Oh yeah, I should probably mention this as well. For social science and medicine subjects, look at the pink. The pink bit is the admissions test, the interview is the yellow bit, and the green part is the personal statement. So it's not that important, but it's still a relatively big chunk, right? Maybe a 6th or 10% or something like that. So that's social science and medicine. That's how important the personal statement is. For maths and social science subjects, very small. The importance of it is very small, and the admissions test and interview are the key bits. The reason I'd say the personal statement is more important in a social science and medicine subject is simply the fact that they could ask you about it in your interview as well. So okay, let's move on then. So given what I've just said, let's think STEM subjects. We're looking at maths, physics, engineering, computer science, physical, natural sciences. What do you think is on the least important part of the spectrum? So put in the chat what you think is on the least important part of the spectrum. And you have those things to choose from, so go for it. Piano, a lot of people are saying piano. Fair enough. Watching the news. DOV, traveling. Piano. Trekking around Asia. Cool. Okay, I agree. What do you think is middle then? What do you think is in the middle? What do you think is medium important if we're applying to a STEM subject? So I've got there EPQ. Yeah, a couple of people put EPQ. Work experience is so important, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. We've got piano, DOV, news, MOOC, work experience, EPQ, watching the news. Okay, what do you think could be very important for a STEM applications for a maths, physics, engineering, or computer science? If somebody's put computing project, past papers, work experience, past papers, work experience, project, work experience, solving tough problems, past papers, solving tough problems, work experience, and past papers. All right, Chris, explain for a STEM subjects, what is the balance here?
Well, let's start with the least important. So everyone mentioned piano, it's not really relevant to your subject. Duke of Edinburgh, most of what you do also isn't going to be that relevant to your subject. Trekking around Asia, likewise. Watching the news, it can be useful to sort of expand your horizons a bit, maybe broaden your interest in the subject, but it's not really developing your ability or potential. If we look at some middling things, so work experience, for some subjects it might be useful. So say engineering, chemistry, subjects where you might have to do lab work when you're at uni. It could be useful. It doesn't actually tend to develop your ability to pass the admissions test or pass the interview that much. I mean, a lot of people mentioned it earlier when they were talking about what they thought might be most important, but I think Oxford and Cambridge have also said like they know that some people have more ability to access work experience than others, and they do take that into account. So for STEM, at least, it's not among the most important things. Reading a book, it really depends on the book. If it's something that's giving you problems to do, that can really help you prepare. If it's just reading around your subject, it might, again, broaden your horizons a bit, but that's all. An EPQ, it can stretch you, it can get you to do some research, so that can be somewhat useful. Likewise, a computing project is something you're actually doing, it might be improving your skills.
Yeah, what I want to emphasize here is that in an EPQ or a project, you're doing research. I mean, computing, you might be actually doing some stuff, but in an EPQ, you're typically doing research about other people's work. And it's not developing your ability to think in the way that you might for that subject necessarily.
Yeah, and a MOOC, so Pavel, what is his massive
online open course?
Online open rather than the other way around. Okay. An online course, again, is useful, especially if you have problems or exercises to do as part of it. That can actually sort of extend your skills. And the most important things are, just bear in mind, this is preparing for your application. So preparing to actually get an offer. You want to do things that are going to help you pass the admissions test. I say pass, but get a good score in the admissions test. And do well in the interview. And that means doing past papers, either of your admissions test or similar tests, and solving tough problems to improve your problem solving skills. Just bear in mind, this is STEM here, so things like, well, science subjects, engineering and maths. We're going to look at the other subjects in just a second.
Okay, right, next one, same exercise, but we're looking at imagine you have an Oxbridge economics application, right? Instead, so social sciences, economics application. Same things, what do we think are least important things here? because it's different for all the different subject types. So what's least important for an economics application, would you say? Put in the chat to me. No one's people are writing. Okay, cool. Piano. Okay, I think we've established piano is on there. Somebody says D of V. What else? Trekking around Asia. Yeah. Okay, D of V, right. The news. Okay, interesting. Somebody thinks the news isn't that important. Piano. Piano and trekking. Okay, what about middle? What's medium important for economics? Okay, we've got EPQ, the news. Watching the news, EPQ, MOOC. The news. All right, okay, what have we got, Chris? Okay, interesting. And then these things are the most important. So Chris, quickly talk us through all of those, please.
Okay, so piano, D of E, tracking, kind of the same reasons as for STEM. Computing is less directly relevant to your subject. You could still learn some useful things, but not so relevant. Work experience, like as Pavel was saying, maybe your personal statement is more important than before. Maybe in your interview, you want to be able to talk about, you maybe want some like general knowledge to draw from, and work experience could maybe help with that, but it's still not super relevant to preparing to apply. MOOCs are useful, you can learn from them, likewise your EPQ, same as before.
But I think I just want to emphasize that we're not saying any of these things are bad to do, but are they going to necessarily make you stand out in an Oxbridge application? That's what we're looking at here in the least and most important part.
Well, so, and the same as before, there's likely to be an admissions test. You want to do past papers, especially for, say, the TSA, because it's unlike anything else you'll have seen in your life.
And the TMUA for Oxford Maths, I mean, sorry, for Oxford Economics, it's like purely a maths test. So you need to...
Cambridge Economics.
Sorry, what did I say? I have no idea what I said. Cambridge Economics, yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And solving just general tough problem solving, especially for Cambridge Economics, as you say, maths is a major component. Reading a book, you don't just want to spend all your time reading, but having done some reading and being able to talk about that, especially in an interview, is actually really useful. And likewise, watching the news, you don't have to spend like 2 hours a day keeping on top of everything, but it's useful to have some general knowledge to draw on, some examples to draw on. Like your interview questions might be based around sort of current economic affairs. So it's useful to have kept on top of, at least to some extent.
In fact, we actually have Will now with us. So Will, I don't know if you want to comment on anything that we have discussed just now, if you are around.
Yeah, I'm around. So when you're reading a book,
can you show yourself on video, please, as well, if possible?
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Hi, so when you're reading around to try and find books that you want to do, my best advice would be to look for a subject that interests you first in economics, and then try and find a book there. Because I've often done a fair few mock interviews with people, and every year or so there's often one book that comes up. This year it's Banerjee is a fairly common author across personal statements. A couple of years ago it was for economics, and so the main book for every year sort of comes up. It's most likely people just searching up best book for Cambridge interview or Oxford interview for economics. So find a subject that interests you in economics and read a book on it. Don't just search up what is the best book for economics, because there is no one book. You've got to be able to show a passion. If you're from Greece, a book by Yanis Varoufakis, the old Greek finance minister, is an excellent choice. If you're from Britain, a book about Margaret Thatcher and John Major's privatisation of national industries is another good choice. So make sure when you're choosing books that you're actually interested in and could actually go on a long conversation with an academic in your interview.
Fantastic, really good advice. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on now. We're going to do the same activity, but for medicine. Now, let's just focus on the most important this time. What do you think are the most important things to do for a medical application? And Daniel, I'm going to call on you in just a second to get ready. Okay, put it in the chat then. What do you think is important for a medical application? Got quite a few: work experience, EPQs and books, problem solving, work experience, solving difficult problems, extra reading, solving tough problems. past papers, work experience. All right, cool. Chris, what do we actually have?
Okay, so piano, trekking, again, not super relevant, unless maybe you're volunteering while you're trekking, because that's basically like work experience. Computing project, not super relevant to your subject, but at least you're doing something. A MOOC can still be useful. So solving tough problems, maybe, but just bear in mind that maybe for interview prep is more useful. Your admissions test is more about speed than like long, difficult problems. DV is a bit more important than before because of the volunteering element, which you would be encouraged to talk about. Reading a book is also useful, so you have things to talk about in your interview. Sometimes I just ask you to talk about something you've read recently. An EPQ, we've heard is especially important for, or not important, but relevant for Oxbridge medicine, because they actually like you to show you're capable of research. That's an important aspect of the degree. Watching the news, again, relevant for interview prep. Work experience is basically required for medicine, unlike the other subjects, so that's up at the most important end. And past papers, the BMAT, you do want to do lots of past papers because it's very time pressured. You've got to get used to the format and so on.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Daniel, is there anything more you want to add in terms of extra supercurricular activities that are important for Oxbridge?
I think one thing that's really important is you don't just do work experience, because anyone can do like a week here, a week there. It's what you do with what you've seen. So let's say you're in an A&E clinic, you see a patient come in with some sort of fracture, you go on and like read around that fracture. Or more interestingly, like let's say you're in a diabetes clinic, you actually go look into type 1, type 2 diabetes a little bit more, the pathophysiology, how you can help patients, what's the research. Because the other thing is, part of work experience is some people will have contacts, and they're not just trying to see who's done like loads of work experience. They're trying to see who's actually taken that extra step and gone a bit further. So I think that's really key. And that links all your work experience, your MOOCs, your reading all in one. And that's really important for your personal statement as well.
Just kind of like having a theme and like taking what you saw in practice and then applying and reading around it and showing that intellectual curiosity and passion for your subject as well. Okay, fantastic. All right, so let's move on then. So supercurriculars, Chris, what is the difference between super and extracurricular activities and where can people find them?
In short, extracurricular activities are non-subject related, so that might be playing the piano, looking around Asia. Supercurriculars are subject related, so well, we've got some examples here. For say STEM subjects, you might be doing Olympiads or academic competitions, like physics Olympiad, or that could include essay competitions for say economics. Projects, EPQs, and research are also supercurricular because they're on your subject. If you watch lectures, maybe you watch videos online or you attend summer schools, again, supercurricular. And MOOCs and other online courses. I've got an example here. This is a screenshot from MIT's online course finder. They put all their undergraduate courses online, and the first year ones are actually quite useful for preparing for an Oxford application sometimes. If we look at some subject-specific ones just very quickly, I've got some examples. Maths and computer science, you might find problems on various websites, so Enrich and Plus Maths are some examples. You can do additional modules from A-level, especially say further maths modules that you might not be doing at school. Maybe you decide to do like a stats module that you aren't doing at school. Programming is potentially useful even if you're applying for maths. For problem solving practice, and also you do actually, that is part of your degree. Sciences, there are so-called bridging problem books. So those are books that the difficulty is basically between A-level and university. So they're again good for Oxbridge prep. Hobbies where you actually have to apply your skills, like maybe you're in a robotics club or something. And again, programming, that's actually an important part of many degrees like physics and engineering. Economics, besides say, we talked about the news before, that doesn't just mean watching the news, that might be reading, listening to podcasts, reading magazines. When you're looking at books, maybe you want to read some significant historical text just to sort of read about the background to your subject. So things like, and a lot of students do things like debating or model UN. It's not like debating itself is a skill you really need to practice, but it can help to practice expressing yourself and like thinking about certain issues. And in medicine, well, work experience and volunteering we've already discussed as being extremely important. And it is also useful to keep on top of current affairs and maybe sort of academic podcasts and magazines, maybe you even read research articles, something like that. Just to quickly mention this, in the book, we have examples of sources of podcasts and videos you might want to watch for various subjects. And
a lot
also,
of examples, actually, a lot of examples of books as well. So if you are interested, just scan the QR code as well, and you can grab a copy of that book off Amazon. Or you can just type in the Oxbridge Formula on Amazon and find it. Okay, we've got examples of bridging problem books as well, actually, in our book as well, so that you can have a look there for some more examples. So in terms of study skills, right? So this whole section is about working. So I'm going to go through this quite fast, right? Because I really want to get onto the Q&As. A lot of you asked questions, and we've got Daniel and Will here with us. So some mistakes are people spend way too long with the personal statement. I showed you earlier that the personal statement is due in about 3 days before the admissions test. And I also showed you that the admissions test is far more important for a lot of these subjects than the personal statement. So do not spend your whole summer and all of your time in your personal statement and neglect your admissions test. Spending too long choosing a college as well. You know, make a quick decision and then stick with it, and then spend the time on the things which are actually important. Not doing enough practice questions. I think we've already seen that would be a big issue. But importantly, not doing any timed practice or questions in exam conditions is a really bad mistake, because we said that a lot of these tests are highly time pressured, and you have to practice them in time conditions in order to figure out how you're going to do on the real day, right? And also not doing any interview focused preparation, being like, oh, I'm not going to do any, I don't know if I've got an interview yet or not, or why should I bother starting to prep before I know? As I said, these are skills that take a long time to develop, so you must start your interview preparation as soon as possible. Now, what can you do to help you? You can plan your time really well. On the next page, we're going to show you a little timetable. And by creating a timetable or a study plan, it helps you get your work-life balance, because I know that is an issue for some people. They don't, you know, they want to make sure that they have a good work-life balance. So in planning your time really well and effectively, we can make sure that you know, you can feel confident, as Paul likes to say, you know when that moment is where you can just drop your pen, because you've done enough work and you know what work you had to do because it was nice and structured, and you're like, tick, okay, good, I can go and enjoy the rest of my day now. So let's move on to the next page. Chris, talk us through a typical study plan that we might recommend.
Well, okay, so the students, they've spread out their mocks across the year maybe. So this week they're doing a mock. So this is a physics student, they're doing their physics admissions test mock. So they do that one evening, and they probably do this in timed conditions for practice. It's worth noting that the next day it says marking / redo. So the first thing they probably do is continue with any questions that they didn't have time to finish, because most of these tests, especially at the beginning, you won't finish within the time. And then they can briefly look over the mark scheme. They don't want to just immediately read any solutions or watch video solutions. They probably want to have a go at questions they know they did wrong, to see if they can spot what they did wrong and practice getting the right answer instead. And then after that, they can make time to go through the solutions in detail and look for, basically reflect on what they should have learned from each of these questions. What can they learn from the solutions they're watching? And then make a cheat sheet of all those things they've learned, so they don't forget them. They can come back and revise that cheat sheet later. This student also, some other things they can do are that they'll have tuition on one of the days, and maybe they come to a workshop on a Friday evening.
Gosh, sorry about that. Okay, yeah, next thing, tracking marks. When you do pass papers, make sure you mark your work and you actually act on it. And the third thing is interpret your marks. Are you actually on track, right? So if you look there, for example, the TMUA, you needed to get a 7.2 or above to get into Cambridge for computer science. So if you're not marking your work and you're not converting your score and checking how you're doing, how do you know if you're actually on track or not? It's really important. So you can compare your marks to the official reports or feedback or explanation of results, as they've shown here. And you should also spot patterns of weaknesses or strengths. So if you've got specific weaknesses, you can actually go and work on those and get extra support, maybe from, as we see on our next slide, a tutor or somebody who can help you. Oh, actually, it's not on the next slide. Striving for success. So the other thing is, don't rush. Like, there's only a limited number of past paper questions. Don't just do them all at once and think, oh, I just want to do as many as I can. What you want to do is actually want to struggle with the questions, because they're designed to make you think, and they're designed to make you stuck, frankly. and be okay with the feeling of being stuck. Don't look at solutions too quickly. Try a question one day, repeat it again the next day, repeat it again the next day. Give yourself multiple goes at doing it. And you know, with something like a program, we give you video solutions to every question, right? But you don't want to watch those video solutions too quickly. You might just want to watch a little bit of the video to get a hint and then carry on the question on your own. But the point is, the more you can do on your own, the better. But then you can use other resources to support you and increase your confidence for when the next time you do it, you can do it on your own. Becky will put the link in the chat for the one last time, but I'm going to hand over right now to Jansu to do the Q&A. Jansu will do a few. Paul, get a few questions ready yourself. We'll swap between the two. We've got myself, Chris, Daniel, Will, and Paul for a few of the questions to answer your questions, and we are here and ready and waiting. So what I would say to the panelists is, we've got about 70 questions in the chat right now. I think that's going to get even higher as we go along. So keep your answers concise, but informative is how I would say it. And if we don't answer your question, I'm really sorry. We're probably not going to get, just with the limits of time, we might not get to answer every single question. But if you do have other questions, getting yourself booked into a consultation, we can answer some more of your questions there as well. So, Jansu, what have we got?
Okay, so the first question is having 4 A-level subjects, maths, biology, chemistry, and physics, more beneficial rather than 3 subjects?
I want to know what subject they're applying for. Is that for medicine? Can we just confirm, is that for medicine? And then we'll come back to the question.
All right, okay.
It depends what question you've asked for, so just let us know. Yeah.
So someone says, my daughter will be interested in maths or economics for uni. What kind of work experience she needs to do, as it's hard to get work experience in corporates?
Will, what do you think?
So work experience is never entirely necessary for getting into Oxbridge. That being said, any personal connections that you've got to get work experience there is good. A lot of companies also run schemes for disadvantaged schools or schools which aren't private schools. So Santander, I think, runs some alongside other banks if they're planning on going into economics. But to be honest, any sort of experience they can get at all is anything they can put on their personal statement is completely fine. It won't take that much space on your personal statement. It'll probably go in the last paragraph as a sort of footnote. The majority of your personal statement for economics should be mainly in discussion of books and articles that you've read, especially for economics. So it's not necessary. It's something that you can do, but your time could always be spent doing other things such as reading books, reading news articles, and doing past papers, which is going to be far more useful to you than doing any work experience. But it is useful, but it's not the best thing that you can do. So don't worry if you can't.
Brilliant, thank you. Jancy, what have we got next?
All right. Somebody asked, within the university courses, how do most people make notes? Like using typing, iPads? Like, I think.
Daniel, what would you say on that one?
I think most of us use this app called Notion, so we type it up. And also in the first 2 years, we get very good lecture handout notes, so people just tend to annotate. But it varies.
Bear in mind that Daniel is a medic. It's not always going to be easy to use Notion for everyone. Just like Will, what do you use?
So I use OneNote. So to be honest, the only thing I would recommend is picking a decent software if you're going to make notes and keeping it consistent throughout the years, because you don't want to have your first year notes on one page, your second year notes on the other page, and your third year notes on the other page. So what the software is doesn't really matter as long as you can write decent notes on it. Consistency is the main thing.
Question for me: does anyone write on paper nowadays? Anyone?
No.
I did 10 years ago. I have to say, for the lecture notes online was so good. I mostly did calculations on paper and little notes for myself. You don't have to record everything the lecturer is saying in subjects where the lecture notes are good.
That's interesting.
One of my friends only does handwritten, and he does med. So.
Okay, I think so. Basically, it could be a mixture of all things. But if you did want to use an app, that's also good. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You don't have to worry about it at this point, either.
To be fair, Chris, I think iPads didn't really exist 10 years ago, so we're all quite old. Yeah. I did all my notes on paper. So anyway, okay, if you are applying, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, can you pick specific sciences to do as part of natural sciences at Cambridge?
Yeah. So say physics, you really want to focus on physics. Probably what you do is you say you're interested in physics in your application. When you get to uni, you're going to do mostly physics and maths courses, but in your first year, you'll probably have to do something else. Well, you will have to do something else as well. which might be, say, chemistry or materials or even earth sciences or something. But after your first year, then you can specialize.
Yeah, if you're applying for engineering, what sort of admissions test you would get? Well, Oxford, it will be the PAT exam. For Cambridge, it's going to be the ENGA exam. Is there a step test for every single course? So currently, Cambridge Maths will require a step exam, and also computer science at Imperial. There is one college at Cambridge that requires it for every single subject. So I guess be mindful of that, but that's only one college. Does Oxbridge reject admissions if the students had not done work experience related to the subject, that subject they need to learn?
No, I think we've said already that Oxbridge don't really necessarily think of work experience that highly, except for subjects like medicine, where I think, Daniel, do you want to comment on, if somebody hasn't done work experience, what are their chances of getting into medicine?
I think they're very appreciative that not everyone can get work experience, but they do want to see that you've taken at least a step and tried. So whether that's like even volunteering like a hospice or doing like online work experience, which there are a lot of options available. I think for medicine, you need to show at least that you've gone like one step further and shown some commitment.
Okay, thanks.
This is quite a recent topic. So why does chemical engineering have a separate admissions process from the other engineering courses? For
I think the first thing to note is that the chemical engineering degree got revamped this year. So it's now chemical engineering and biotechnology. Well, firstly, if you're applying to engineering at Cambridge, you normally take the ENGA, which is physics and maths. For chemical engineering, you take the ENSA, which gives you the opportunity to choose chemistry as your science subject when you're doing the admissions test, which you probably want to do because you need chemistry A-level when you're applying. And also, say at interview, you'll be asked chemistry questions, and the actual course has a lot more chemistry in it, as you would expect.
Yeah, somebody says, my daughter's in GCSE. When is the best time to start your program? Well, we do have a year 11 and even year 10 programs. So absolutely book yourself a consultation so that we can discuss your daughter's application. If I said 3 exams for Oxford 9, not sure between engineering and maths and computer science, does that mean that I will be selecting the course that I want to study, or will I be offered a course by Oxbridge based on exam results?
So you always apply for a particular subject, right? You don't just do the test and then they pick you. You pick the subject you want to apply for. Yeah, that's a good question.
And the test is afterwards, just to clarify, after you apply.
Yeah.
Is there an admissions test for psychology at Cambridge?
I believe not currently.
No, there used to be one, but not anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so it says on the booking side, it says confirmed that you have 8 9s, and I only have 7 9s. Would this mean I won't have a consultation? No, you can still have the consultation. So book yourself in. It's just that, again, we like to discuss academic background, so we'll just go into details as well. So book yourself in to the consultation. Someone says, what about computer science? What about computer science? What are you trying to ask?
Be more specific. Make sure your questions are specific enough.
Exactly. Someone says, I'm currently doing biology, chemistry, physics, and EPQ, and I would like to apply for medicine. Would doing an extra AS level core maths be helpful? Daniel?
It could be helpful in interview questions and once you apply, and I guess it shows that you can deal with workload, but I don't think it'd be like a key differentiating factor.
Okay.
All right. And are interview questions based on more problem solving than around what you can bring to the course in terms of experience and skills? I would say yes, for STEM subjects.
Yeah, Paul, do you want to answer that question? So what is it? Is it more about problem solving or experience?
It's all about problem solving. It's all about what you can bring to the course. How do you think? Everyone's got different experience. What you need to demonstrate is the ability to think your way through a particular problem.
Okay, fantastic. Are the interviews for Oxbridge conducted in the style of MMIs, Daniel?
No, they're panel. So you'll have 1 or up to 3 interviewers, and they'll be asking you a series of questions. It's not MMI.
Yeah, and I think when you're, the important thing to know, as we said earlier, is an Oxbridge medicine interview is kind of like an Oxbridge like a Cambridge biological natural sciences interview. Do you want to comment on that, Daniel, a little bit more? I'll stop you if I need to, but feel free to.
So originally, I remember when I went to my first interview, I expected it to be very much scientific, and it was, I'd say 60-70%, but I was surprised that they did still care about like your work experience, your personal statement, you as a person, which I think are more important in medicine a little bit compared to say other Oxbridge subjects. But yeah, it is very much like a Bionatsky interview, but related to medicine, because at the end of the day, it's a vocational subject, so they want to see that, are you going to be a good doctor?
Great. Okay. So if I'm ready to study maths at Cambridge, is it worth doing an EPQ? And if so, what are the best topics inside of maths to do it on? Chris, do you want to comment on that?
It's not the most important thing to do. It can be useful. I'd suggest that if you're going to do it, it be something where you get to sort of stretch your problem solving skills somehow. Maybe you look at extend some further maths topic, or maybe you look at some stuff that comes up at uni and look into it a bit more, and just to get some practice with harder maths.
What I just want to emphasize is don't do it instead of further maths. It's way more important that you do further maths A level than an EPQ. That's really, really
in fact, it's like if you can take further maths, you just can't apply any maths.
You can't apply that.
Yeah. And I'd encourage, especially when applying to Cambridge, I'd encourage taking physics as well before doing an EPQ.
Sorry, and economics as well. If you're looking to do economics, the further maths is massively important.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned that for BMAT, math skills are required, but my son doesn't take maths A level. He does take the 3 sciences, does English instead. Are the math skills required for the BMAT learned in his courses, or must he change his subjects to have a chance? I would quickly answer that just to say he doesn't need to have A level maths. However, it's like what I see again and again is people forget a lot of the GCSE maths by the time it comes to the BMAT. So he will just need to make sure he revises it and keeps up to date with all of it. And I'm seeing a lot of nods from Daniel and Jancy. Great. Does economics require A-level maths if you have done A-level economics? Yes. A-level maths is required and A-level economics is not. Correct, Will? We're in economics.
Yep. So I actually didn't do A-level economics. I did maths, further maths, chemistry, and physics. So A-level economics is not required in the slightest. A-level maths is required. A-level further maths is highly recommended, especially for the more mathematical colleges. So Christ's, Trinity, and St. Catherine's, don't apply there if you're not doing further maths because they are highly mathematical.
Okay, great, good. Very.
I just want to say, so for Oxford, that's different. You don't need as much maths.
Okay. Is doing the AEA or other award important in distinguishing yourselves from other candidates when applying for Oxbridge? One thing I'll say is I think it's a really good thing to do. I did the AEA for 2 subjects. However, it takes place after your application's done. So it doesn't really affect your chances of getting in or not, if that makes sense. The AEAs kind of happens afterwards with your A levels. All right, next.
Doing the papers can be useful practice. So.
That's true. I think, yeah, they could be. Yeah, they could be. Jancy, what have we got next?
Is this program only for STEM subjects, for all subjects? Actually, no. Obviously, we have a heavy emphasis on STEM, but we do economics, E&M, chemistry, medicine in particular, and other social sciences as well. So book yourself in for a consultation and we can absolutely discuss how we can help you.
And let us know which subject you're doing in the chat as well, so we can give you more info.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We already answered a 4A level question. So someone says, I have 7 A stars at GCSEs. However, I got a grade C in English language and I have an intention to resit it. Would you advise me to apply to Oxbridge anywhere, or I can be massively disadvantaged because of the resit?
Paul, do you have any insight on that?
I think you really have to reset it. The problem is it just gives them a reason to reject your application. Think about the part of the applications they've got. Everyone's going to be applying with a very, very good set of GCSEs. If you could reset it, I would strongly advise that you do.
Yeah, what I would say as well, what was I going to say? I've forgotten. Reset it, and Oxford cares more about GCSEs than Cambridge, if I'm not mistaken. So Cambridge might be your place to go. And you might also want to consider taking a gap year so that when you're applying, you've already got a higher grade before you apply.
I just want to also suggest it really depends on your subject.
Okay.
I doubt for maths they care that much.
I think the minimum is a B. I think minimum is a grade 6 needed for.
Oh, that's okay. 6 is not.
I can't. The question's gone. If we could not have the questions go straight away, but I can't remember if you said literature or language. Was it literature or language that this person asked for?
Language. It was language.
Yeah, I think the language was important. I think you have to
Okay.
get grade 6 or above, ideally. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Is it possible / likely to get an offer, and what would incline the schools to make an offer? I'm not sure about what they mean.
you've got to do really well in your admissions tests and your interviews and your A-levels. And then, you know, that's going to give you the highest chance of getting an offer. Somebody says they did a program with another organization for engineering work experience in order to gain work experience. It was very expensive, but I'd like to know if you think it's worth it, please. Again, I would say it's probably a good thing to do, don't get me wrong, but you need to focus on your admissions test preparation and your problem solving skills, because that's what's going to actually help you get in. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do by any means. I'm sure it's an extremely good experience. It's probably really useful when you're looking for a job. But for Oxbridge specifically, those two things would be where I'd focus. Would it disadvantage people from not taking further maths if they wanted to study biological natural sciences at Cambridge? I would say no. Daniel, do you have any thoughts on that?
Having chatted to two of my Bionatsky mates, apparently most people do have further maths, but it is possible to get in with that. And it also depends on like which modules you choose once you get in as well. So.
Okay, yeah.
I believe there's a separate stream for people without further maths. In fact, you choose different maths options.
Yeah, they have different maths courses if you did further maths versus if you didn't. Yeah, I remember they have like part A, part B. How many hours do you need for exam prep and Oxford prep if you're not signing up for a course? I mean, I would say a similar amount. You want to do a similar amount of work. You can't do less if you don't join the program. I would say a similar amount is a good amount. Okay, is DFE important at all? One thing we would normally say is that in DFE you have volunteering, and I think for subjects like medicine, volunteering is really important. Apart from that, the skills of one teacher emailed us to say today, saying, you know, DFE is really important. It makes you an all-rounder. I think as a person, I think it's a really good thing to do. Will it specifically help your Oxbridge application? For most subjects, I don't think so. So yeah, how can we find? Okay, the things I will say is doing something like DFE can give you confidence and give you all that stuff, which actually might make you apply to Oxbridge when you might not have anyway, because it's just increased your confidence as a person. But in itself, the various components of it, do I think that they would directly contribute to you? Yeah, go on, Paul.
Well, it's much as Parul is saying, you know, of intrinsic value, very, very little, to be brutally honest, at this level of the application process. However, if you can achieve DV Gold while also demonstrating extraordinary academic achievement, then that has value. So it's all about how you can balance it and use it to your best advantage.
I mean, I think it does have intrinsic value. I just mean whether or not it actually contributes directly at this stage to your Oxbridge application is the question. So I agree with you, Paul, though. Yeah, if you can demonstrate you can multitask and do loads of things, then that's a good thing to put in your personal statement. How do we find MOOCs, Chris?
I mentioned MIT,
yeah.
Which is a very good source. What are some other examples? Coursera is a big one. They're easy to find online, to be honest.
Just type in MOOC in your subject.
Yeah, I just suggest looking for ones where you have to do exercises rather than just watch videos.
Okay, somebody says they do 5 A-levels, physics, chemistry, maths, mathematics, and French. Wow, nice. Should they consider an EPQ? That's quite a lot. I wouldn't say it's necessary. Will, you're laughing there. Do you have any comments on that one?
Just make sure that you're able to actually fit them all in. 5 A-levels and an EPQ, you're going to struggle to get admissions tests in. So it's a fairly common phrase, but make sure you're using the time to the best use. Like if you're thinking about doing an EPQ and 5 A-levels, that's about 10 hours a week for that EPQ. Could those 10 hours of EPQ be spent better doing admissions test prep? Yes. So if you can get those 10 hours and the interview prep in, and you're able to do all those 5 A-levels and EPQ and interview prep, do it. But if you think that's unreasonable, and I think that's bordering on, that's a fairly substantial amount of work, then I would focus more on the interview prep and the admissions test questions.
Okay, I think that's actually really useful advice. Thanks, Will. Daniel, how did you get the grades for Oxbridge? How much revision did you do? And do you have any study techniques you could share? Will, you're next.
Well, I never did my exams.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. It was during all that pandemic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any tips anyway for BMAT that you could share, maybe?
BMAT, I think, especially since most of you will be doing the UCAT, do focus on UCAT, getting that done over the summer before term starts. And then once you've done that, immediately start like moving towards BMAT. The revision guides, a lot of it's GCSE, so the content will be fine. It's just about covering it and doing as much practice as you can. You've got a fair few years, but make sure you do it under timed conditions. Because realistically, if you've got enough time in the world, you can do the questions. If you've only got a certain amount of time, like a couple of minutes per question, that's where the real difficulty is.
And what work, I'm going to come to you in a second, Will, but what work experience did you do, Daniel?
I did work experience in a GP, one in Pakistan in an A&E ward, and one here in an hospital in an elderly care ward.
Okay, thanks. And Will, your study tips or techniques for the admissions test?
The admissions test, the only thing you can do really is pass papers. So I would start off doing the oldest ones you can, and then get towards the newest ones, because newest ones will be most relevant. So make sure you're doing those closer to the end. Also looking at other admissions tests, there's a fair bit of crossover between the ENGAA, the TMUA, the NSAA. A lot of them share questions or make the questions slightly different, so you can always get more practice there. But past papers is the main way to do it, and then going over your solutions and actually making sure that you're marking them. If you get one wrong, like really go through it, make sure you understand every key concept behind it. And at the same time, like, I know it's very difficult, especially if you've got a mark scheme to one side and you're marking as you go along, to take a quick look at the answers. So make sure you do it in time conditions without the answers anywhere near you, so you're not tempted in the slightest, and then go back and mark them and then go through them. Make sure you really delineate between doing them, marking them, and reviewing them is the best way to do it.
Amazing. Okay, guys, we have got still another 80 plus questions in the chat. So I'm going to now be quite ruthless in terms of picking these questions. So blah, blah, blah. Somebody's asking about the book. Just go check it out on Amazon. You know, it's got like you can look at the first 2 pages for free. So that'll give you information there. In terms of programming, such as supercurricular things, in terms of programming as a supercurricular, is this coding such as Python?
Yes. Yes, that's what we meant.
Yeah. Do you have to select a college, or can you make an open offer? You can make an open offer. Is it feasible to apply for BioNetSki if you don't take maths A level? I think what about maths? We talked about further maths, but can you do BioNetSki without maths?
I believe it's possible, but I wouldn't encourage it.
Okay. Can we apply to multiple subjects at one university? I believe no, not at Oxford or Cambridge, no. Do you have any screening process to accept candidates? How do you know that a student is capable of doing your program? So Jancy, do you want to talk about that quickly?
Well, yes, that's why we have the consultation process in particular. So we will be going through your academic background, your motivations, and most importantly, the assessment that you do for us as well. So it's basically it's a conversation. I don't want to scare anyone, obviously. In the end, we're here to help. But yeah, there's definitely a screening process. It is an intensive program, guys. So obviously, we want to pick potential as well.
What I would very quickly say is if you've got a question and you're not specific about it, then we won't be able to answer it. So somebody says, is maths going to help me? But if I don't know what subject you're going to do, I can't help you with that. If I'm wanting to study maths at Cambridge, is it worth doing an EPQ? Oh, we've done that one already. Okay, if I'm already on the Cambridge program, is it necessary to apply for this one? Yeah, well, I would say that our program is probably far more intense and extensive than maybe a program that the university is offering. So I'd suggest at least consider it. At least have a chat, see what's different about our program compared to that one. Would doing 4 A levels be more beneficial for chemical engineering, maths, further maths, physics, chemistry? If not, which 3 would be more beneficial? I think if you can do 4 with further maths, I would actually personally encourage it, because I think then you get more breadth in your subjects, and you do the further maths, which is really important. So yeah, I'd say yes. How do you do?
Could I just come in on that
very quickly? Yeah.
In terms of the general 4 A level subject, if the 4th A level isn't further maths, it's probably not worth it.
Okay, great, good. Yeah, thanks. How do you develop innate problem solving skills? I think a lot of practice, a lot of struggling with the question, a lot of struggling, I would say. Chris, any more to add on that?
Well, part of the point is they're not innate, that you do actually develop them via practice. And especially if you've seen a question type before, maybe you've seen a technique that's useful and then you've noted down in your cheat sheet, then you just remember things and you've got a larger toolkit to draw from. Perfect.
Chris, also, is somebody, well, I'm not sure the answer to this one. Is chemistry A level also required for most biology related courses?
Oxford biology, no. I actually just started looking up the requirements for biological and natural sciences, and it depends a lot on the college.
Okay.
So chemistry isn't always required, maths isn't always required, sometimes one of them might be.
Does doing 4 subjects have an impact on the offer a student receives? In other words, if you're doing 4 subjects, could you get a 4 subject offer? And I think, yes, you can, but I don't know if anyone else wants to comment.
You can, but I did 4 A levels and they only asked about maths, biochem. They didn't really care what my 4th A level was.
Whereas I do
you're-
know. Sorry, go on, Paul.
Sorry, Imperial will make you a 4 subject offer if you claim you're doing 4.
And I have had, I've had a physical natural science person at Churchill College also say that they got made an offer with 4 before. So I think it is possible, basically. What should
I
my
think we should maybe say it's not usual though. Like the standard offer is 3.
what should my personal statement consist of mainly for medicine application in 3 points? Well, the 3 key points they should add on their medical application, Daniel.
Work experience, your like extra reading, work experience and volunteering, and then link all of this together into like your motivation for medicine and your love of science.
Thank you so much. How important is a sport? I would say, based on what we looked at earlier, not really that important for an academic subject at Oxbridge, unless you're going for, I don't know, university team or sports scholarships. I don't know if that even exists.
It's still not, it's not relevant to your application success.
Okay, what would you say is the easiest way to select your chosen subject if you're conflicted? I think come along to a consultation, because I don't know what subject it is, so I can't help you right now. The medicine I'm doing, maths, biology, chemistry, physics, is physics really relevant? I would say that you could do medicine without it. Would you agree? Yes. What's the best study techniques you've used to help you get the grades for Oxbridge, and how did you revise? I think we already discussed that one. My daughter chose maths, chemistry, and economics and geography as first year A-level subjects, and will drop one of them in second year. What is your suggestion? Is this a good combination of subjects to apply for maths or economics at uni? I think you just need maths, and econ. I don't think the other subject really matters. So whichever one she wants to drop. Geography could be quite good for economics, I reckon. So I don't know, Will, if you have any thoughts on that, just give me a quick yes or no.
I wouldn't think so, no. I'd go with maths, further maths, economics, and then a science, just because I'd especially go with physics, because physics has so much overlap with
the other one was chemistry. So would you recommend chemistry?
Chemistry, yeah. Chemistry or physics, because they've got so much overlap with the further maths course that you'll just make your life a lot easier.
Oh, nice. Okay, do Oxford, it's a good, yeah, good point. Do Oxford prefer students doing 4 A levels, one doing EPQs? Again, I think we've said if you're going to do further maths and you're doing a STEM subject, that's preferred, I think. Preferred A-level subject choices for computer science or economics? Maths, further maths, computer science or economics? Is physics mandatory for computer science or economics? I think for computer science, they actually do really like the physics course. They really like it. We were told by a professor or a director of studies there. Is physics necessary for economics? No, but as Will said, it's probably got a large overlap with maths and therefore might make your life easier. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything there.
I just want to say, if you're asking if something is mandatory, you can look up the grade requirements on the university website.
Oh, right, yeah. Thanks. Can you get into Oxford with 2 levels and a BTEC? A levels and a BTEC? I think no, I would suggest, but I'm not sure.
No, you're right. The official line is that the way in which the subjects are taught is not the same way in which BTECs are taught, and so they don't think that's appropriate preparation.
Would you suggest still applying to Oxbridge even with a weaker GCSE grades, for example, B's and A's for a subject like psychology or biology?
I would say you probably need at least 3.
I might ask your teachers what your predicted A-level grades are likely to be. And if they meet the standard offer, then why not consider it? You could also phone the university and ask. It's not ideal if you have lots of B's at GCSE.
Good. Okay, 2 more questions then. What are your top tips for preparing for a maths degree at Oxford? Chris. I would say do lots of maths. Do lots of hard maths that you can't initially do, and then hopefully you can eventually do it.
I think, yeah, get used to, so if you're preparing for the actual degree, get used to spending a lot of time on problems, because what happens is you're given a problem sheet, you've got to think about this for a week and then come to your tutorial. So you've got to be used to working independently. STEP is an excellent preparation for that.
I was just going to say, yeah, STEP's really good. And then last question, what am I going to pick now? Some people are spamming us in the chat, which is not appreciated. Sorry, guys. All right.
I was gonna say that we have a question, but it's not necessarily for Oxbridge. Someone says, I've heard that LSE rejects local candidates and accepts 70% of international candidates. Is that true?
Do you know about that, Will? I don't know too much about LSE.
So the LSE, like all universities, will place a balance on international students and home students because international students pay more and they need to fund their day-to-day activities. But they don't actively discriminate against home students. If anything, home students are always given a higher acceptance rate than international students. And that's true for almost every university. It's true at Cambridge and it's true at Oxford as well. So I wouldn't avoid any university based on anything that you've heard of any bias towards international students. No such bias exists, to be completely honest, towards international students. If anything, they're actively discriminated against, but because the government forces universities to have a percentage of home students. So there is no such bias, I would say.
Thank you very much, guys. Huge thank you to all of our panelists. You've all been awesome, like really great. We'll have to leave it there with a Q&A, but I just wanted to ask you one last time in the chat. Tell me the #1 takeaway you have from today. If there's one thing you take away from today's session, put it in the chat, please, guys. Okay, good. So what are people saying? Start now, don't procrastinate. Start preparing early. Start now. Oh, I'm glad this message has got across. Problem solving is vital. To begin preparing now and starting early. Okay, what else have we got? Keep putting it in the chat. If everyone could participate, it would be brilliant. There's still loads of you left in here. Personal statement is comparatively not that important. Just practice for interviews and exams. Brilliant. You guys, thank you so much. Plan for admissions tests from now. Learn to problem solve and deal with the interview is vitally important. That not all extracurriculars are useful for applying to universities. I thought there is possibility to apply to Oxbridge with your help. Oh, fantastic. Brilliant. Any more for any more? Well, and while we're here, is there anything that you think that we didn't add that we could have added? Oh, struggling with math problems is necessary and problem solving and adapting. Yeah, while you're here, anything that we could have included for you that we didn't today, that maybe we can give you some other content about. So let me know if there's something that you really wanted to know about and you're like, I wish I'd covered that. What would that be? Okay. Okay, fair enough. Not much. And lastly, what was your one favorite thing about today's webinar? Like, what was your favorite part of the webinar? What did you really like about it? Somebody says, with suggestions, possibly split it into separate subjects. We do have some separate subject specific things, so keep a lookout. Okay, so some people like that we're really open with all the information. They really like the statistics surrounding the admissions test, the timeline of preparation. That's really useful to know that you thought that was really good. What else? What else was like, oh, I really enjoyed that, I really like that. Somebody says a passion for Oxford is reigniting. Oh, I love that. That's amazing. Somebody says, is it advantageous to be a deputy head boy at their school? Yes, I was deputy head girl. So I think it's just a good thing to write. I mean, it's not going to get you in, but it's a nice thing to add to your personal statement. Being able to
I wasn't.
You weren't. Okay. Being able to. So thank you so much for your time and for staying with us for so long. Really glad that you've all enjoyed the process. And people are saying that was valuable. Thank you so much, everyone. You're most welcome. Just don't. Oh, somebody's asking if they want to do psychology, what subject do they choose? Don't worry about the subject. Just choose any subject and just apply. Just make sure you just put 2024 entry when you're applying. Thank you so much. You're most welcome. Have a great, guys. Good luck. If we don't speak with you again, wishing you all the very, very best of luck with your application, and do let us know how it goes. Like I feel like hopefully we've been part of your application process. Just write to us and let us know how you do, and keep up to date. Stay on our mailing list. There'll be some useful tips coming up in any case. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, and take care. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.